Does one ever wonder about their end? I suppose I should have, seeing as how I was named after the god of beginnings and endings. I remember that day, the day I was named Januarius. I was the eldest of my family. My father owned a vast amount of land, and we had a lot of servants. I was always naive enough to believe that every other child was as lucky as me. I would constantly have to set a good example for my 3 younger brothers. Father was always shouting. I tried to please him as best as I could to escape the harsh feeling of his hands beating on me. I repeatedly saw the tortured look in my mother's eyes, but of course, if she intervened, she too would have been beaten, or worse. I always felt I could escape at school. I learned from the teachings of Annales and Phillips. I also indulged in the language of the Greeks. My favorite reading was a work of Cicero. When it came time for my ceremony of manhood, I chose to go into the army as a soldier. I later progressed into becoming a general. Soon after, my father decided it was time for my marriage. Her name was Livia. I didn't know her, although I couldn't help but like her. My first gladiator game that I never once failed to remember was amazing. It was between Theocles, the shadow of death, and Spartacus, the champion of Capua. That rush you get when hearing the clashing of swords, or the feeling of triumph when the gladiator you've been cheering on thrusts his sword in his opponent's flesh. Indeed, this sport is an exhilarating one. I was a very lucky man. My wife only bore sons for my first few children. It wasn't until the 4th child that I got a daughter. It was clear that she was deformed. I had no choice but to abandon her. For what kind of general would keep a deformed child? I sent the servant to put her in the marketplace, the busiest place in the city, hoping, praying that someone would take her in. It took me months to stop the haunting sound of her cry. I always wondered what would have happened if I allowed one of my servants to keep her. That is my only regret in this life. Then they came. Those barbarians that ruined our way of life. They caused me to be unaware of whether my sons were alive or not. They murdered the woman I loved, laying dead here in my arms, and I knew it would be me next whose life would be taken. There's always been a saying that before every beginning, there was once an end. And after every end, there will always be a beginning.